But we're here today to share and learn, and that's where personal knowledge management comes in. When we were taking the bus, Peter Skedemo, he asked me, is this something you made up, something funny, or is it real? And just so we're clear, I'm not funny. Like, there are no jokes in this presentation. 100 slides of nerdery. But personal knowledge management, it's about getting sure we get maximum usage and value out of what we learn. How many here are into personal knowledge management, or PKM? Yeah, cool. Few of you. So the brain here is a great logo. Shout out to Mikael. Yay! So what do we want from our brain? We want to learn things. We want to remember them when we need them so we can pick them up. We want to be creative. We want to have ideas. We want to remember everything. And we want to connect all the pieces of stuff that we learn into something bigger, something personal for us. And all the while, we want to be calm, relaxed, creative, and create great things. And when we create something, we want to be able to reuse it and build upon it without having to write stuff again or do it again. And how do we do this? I thought I would take some inspiration from this guy. Does anyone recognize him? He's German. His name is Niklas Luhmann. He had a job. He was working 9 to 5, and he was very interested in reading. So he went home and read books after work. And when he encountered something interesting or he had an idea, he wrote it down as a note. And one day he took a bunch of notes and collected them in a book and gave it to a sociology professor. Like, this is what I think about society. And the professor took it home, read it, and suggested that Niklas Luhmann would become a professor of sociology. He had no such degree, no doctoral thesis, no habilitation, which is the even bigger book you should write after your doctoral thesis if you want to be a professor. He didn't even have credentials to be an assistant to a professor. So what did he do? Did he say thank you and go home and get on with his 9 to 5 job? Not Luhmann. He went home to his notes and started working, and he got all the credentials to be a professor in less than a year. And he became a professor at Bielefeld University, a job he had all his life. And he was a productivity madman. Like, his project when he was a professor was to be a theory of society. Over a time frame of 30 years, he would work on this. And he finished his final chapter 29 and a half years later. It became a 2-volume book, and it was a radical new theory that changed sociology. But in his career, he published 70 books and 400 articles. Like, who does that? Think like writing 2 books per year or something, in different fields like economics, politics, sociology, love, economics, finance, politics, everything. Even after he died, half a dozen books were published in his name from unfinished, almost finished manuscripts. And many researchers would give a lot to have a career only with what he published after he died. So how did he do it? Well, lots of talk of ghostwriters these days. He had none of them. He had an assistant who says that his job was to spot typos. So his secret was the way he was working with his notes, which we will have a look at today. So from this impressive guy, let's go over to me. I'm Olof, a product person, joined Teton a little more than a year ago. I'm in an assignment at Svensk Cater at the moment. I can't help but be interested in productivity and apps and stuff. And a friend says that I look like Dave Stewart in Eurythmics, so he sent me this image the other day. So I thought we would talk a bit about personal knowledge management, what it is, and some history, core concepts, how to get knowledge in our system and take it to the next level. I'll sprinkle it with some software and stuff. Sophia, you see I'm using your outline for presentation. Thank you very much. So we're bombarded with information more than ever. We know this, it's a cliche. And we learn stuff every day, but how do we make use of it? Like, can we recall it when we need it? Do we know what we should be recalling? And when we add pieces of knowledge, does it add up to something bigger? How do we manage knowledge to get all this value? Well, note-taking is an obvious answer. It's an old idea. Leonardo da Vinci, who was considered a genius, I think we can agree on, he's famous for having lots of notebooks. During the Renaissance, it was common for people to have a commonplace book, a place where they wrote down interesting stuff that they came across, especially the learned people, and that's us, right? And they used it like a scrapbook, just collected everything and under different headings, depending on their interests. Some famous users were Isaac Newton, Virginia Woolf, H.P. Lovecraft, Thomas Jefferson. These two guys may not look very serious, but they are researchers. This is the only picture I could find of them together. They wrote a theory about the extended brain, that our mind is not only our brain, because we use calculators, our phone books, Google Maps, and everything, and we offload some work from the brain to these devices or these things. But they're still a part of our mind, and it's a great way of seeing things. They wrote the scientific papers. This woman, Annie Murphy Paul, wrote a book about it, which I should read. I've heard her on podcasts though. Externalizing memory can be very beneficial. Like, we don't replace our brain, but we offload some stuff to it, so we free up our brain. I don't know if you remember this book. It was super popular a while back, Getting Things Done, written by David Allen. In it, he says that your brain is for coming up with ideas, not keeping them. Like, when we think of stuff and we think, oh, I need to remember this, we have this background process running all the time to remember all the things we want to remember. But he says we should have mind like water. Like, our mind is a pond, and when we have an idea, that's like throwing a pebble and it creates ripples, and we write it down somewhere and our mind can relax again and we don't have to stress about remembering it. So writing stuff down is great. Then there's this guy who worked for Apple, Tiago Forte. He was getting very sick. He went to see a lot of doctors and no one could help him. And he got really, really bad. Like, he took medication where he lost his memory. He said to his girlfriend, like, wouldn't it be cool to go to Moscow once on our vacation? And she said, well, we were there 8 months ago. Do you not remember this? Which he didn't. Luckily, she had photos. Once when he was waiting to see a doctor, he got an idea and he asked to get his journal, and he digitized it and started to organize the information for himself and work with it more actively. And when he visited doctors again, he asked questions that he wanted and drove the process, so to speak, and found a cure. And he continued to keep his notes organized digitally, and started studying again, and he was very successful. And he developed a concept called building a second brain, a digital place for all our knowledge. So very much an extended mind. It turned into a book that was published last year, and I love it. It has lots of great ideas, and it's written very, very well. So I will steal a lot from it today. And of course, we have now a lot of different digital tools to take notes. Some of them are really geared towards personal knowledge management. There was Rome Research, that's this one. A few years ago, it sparked something new, but today I would say that Obsidian is the app to have a look at. It's very popular. It has very large development community, lots of plugins. Is anybody here using it? Yeah, cool. So I will use it for some examples today. This is Obsidian. It's basically a markdown editor on steroids. Lots of plugins. Works with your just pure text files on your computer, so you're never locked in. So some core concepts for personal knowledge management. These may not look very revolutionary at first, but they sort of add up. It's much of a mindset here. First is to go digital, of course, with our notes. The commonplace book that they had during the Renaissance, that was kind of cool, right? Having a book and a pen at all times. But going digital must be better. We read and write all the time, so much must be easier to find what we've written down before. Except that we write some documents, presentations, we write notes, email, Slack, iMessage, we write code, we save bookmarks, we take photos of interesting stuff, we read books, articles, podcasts, YouTube clips. Like, it's so spread out, it's everywhere, and it's information overload. And then, of course, we don't stay true to one app. Like, we just take chat apps. There's ICQ, Skype, AOL Messenger, WhatsApp, Google Chat, Hangouts, Facebook Messenger, Slack, Teams, Telegram, Signal, Discord, and everything is spread out. So how can we ever find something? So our second core concept here is to have one dedicated place where we put everything, all the knowledge we need, all the ideas we have. Could be Apple Notes that is in every phone and every Mac, or Google Notes or Evernote or whatever. And we just save everything that's useful to us, like tickets, addresses, ideas, your ideas, other people's ideas, quotes, knowledge, code snippets. And these apps, they take more than text, so we can add photos and PDFs and carry it all with us. So we don't ever have to think, oh, I'll write that down later, and have that background process bug us. Per Öqvist, I think you said when we were having lunch a few weeks ago that it's so cool when you start a project that you start up a note for it, and whenever you have ideas, you know where to put them. So that's a great way of thinking of this. Start collecting ideas, and if you know where you should be writing down your ideas, chances are you will. And ideas happen all the time. And then when you sit down to work on your project, you don't start from a blank page. You have all these notes. Like, if thinking is this diamond where we first create choices and then make choices, first half is already done just by writing down stuff as we think of them. So here are notes that I took for this presentation. So when I sat down to start working on this, it's been more about prioritizing and organizing and cutting out. That's quite a different experience than starting from a blank PowerPoint screen. Of course, you now get to suffer 100 slides, but okay, structure. If we throw everything in one place, we probably need some structure. We can always search, but some structure is probably great. How do we structure this? There's a blog called Asian Efficiency. He has his version of folders to use. I love an app called Bear, where you can create tags, nested tags, so you can have sub tags, and documents can live under several tags, and you just make a hashtag in your text and the note appears there. But my favorite is something called Para, Projects, Areas, Reference, Archive. So you have these 4 folders, and under projects, you create a folder for each project you work on right now. And then there are stuff like, that's not a project, but we're always working on stuff like health, finance, family, stuff like that. We put them in areas. And under reference, we can put everything that other people write, stuff we find interesting that we just want to save, and we can have subfolders underneath here. And then archive, that's where we put our projects once they're finished. This is a concept by that Tiago Forte guy and building the second brain, for instance. And it's very easy to get started with. We just take everything we have and we put it in archive, and then we start from there and build up. And we can keep the same structure across several apps. So like we can have the same structure in our file folders and in our to-do apps and so on if we do spread out after all. The file structure is what I use the least. I try to keep stuff in my notes. And then if we have this structure and we have an idea, we don't want to think about, where should I put that? Is it in this folder? Or where did I put that? What did I call it? Did I call it music or composition or whatever? Like, it should be easy to write something down. So we should have an inbox somewhere. We don't have to think. Whenever we have an idea or we find something, we just take a photo, write it down, and put it in our inbox. And then we can sort it out later and put it in the right folder at a different time. Some people use an app just to be the inbox. Another concept is the concept of daily notes, that each day we start a new note with just the date. And we use that as a scratch pad for everything we do during the day. We collect bits and pieces. If we have ideas, we write it down there like an inbox, sort of supercharged. This is one of mine. There's what I, for the daily and stuff I'm working on and so on. And then at the end of the day, or maybe the next day, we can see if there's anything I need to save, we can just move it somewhere else. You see over there in the left, I have calendar integration. I have all my meetings. I like to create a note for my meetings in advance and start collecting ideas. And when it's time for a meeting, I have these things I want to talk about, and then I can take notes there as well. And it's often integrated into these apps, so they have native tools to move stuff around and so on to make it easy. Another concept is backlinks. Like in these apps, we can create links between pages. Here's Obsidian. And as you see, this is one of my documents here, and I've made a lot of links in the text. But over here in the right panel, I have backlinks. Those are other notes that link to this note. So I can even find stuff that way. That's called backlinks or bidirectional linking. So when we write down a note and we work on it, we can start making connections between stuff. That's where we can be creative and create new stuff. Some apps even show, unlinked mentions. Like if I wrote outcomes over output somewhere, but I didn't link it, it will show up here so that I can remember to make a link. And linking lends itself very well to making index pages or dashboards of some sort. Here's one for my work at Svenskator. The most important things I'm working on right now, some links that I should check out and so on. And what's nice about this is that we create it for ourselves. So much is social these days, and we should explain it to everyone else and fit into someone else's structure and so on. But not this. It's just for us. And of course, templates make it faster. Like we can have a template for the daily note or the sprint review and for books we read. And there are lots of inspiration to find online, of course. Moving on from these concepts, how do we get stuff into our personal knowledge management system? Well, starting with ideas, that's very important. When we think of something cool, should be super simple to take a note of it so we remember it. We have ideas all the time, but quite often we forget them after a while, which is a shame. If we can get them into our system at once, if there's no friction, we just put it in there, we don't lose them. And in there, ideas can incubate, we can see them, we can add to them, and some we will discard as just bad ideas, but some will be the jewels that we make something new out of. There's an app called Drafts that many use just as an inbox because it was branded as where text starts. Every time you start it, there's just a new blank note, and it's super easy to move stuff from it. You can create custom actions for sharing to all your other apps. It's very useful on the Apple Watch, where it's an app, you start it, and there's just a button for a microphone, and you can start dictating. So even if we're out running with just our watch or whatever, and we have an idea, it's super easy to just note it down and have it later. Other apps have this too. Bear, for instance, that app with all the nested tags have it too. Books are great to read. Pro tip. And Kindle is outstanding here. It's super easy to just highlight interesting things we find in books. And it doesn't interrupt our reading. It's very easy to do. And when we're done reading a book, we can share all the highlights and notes we took in a book in one go into our personal knowledge management system. And even if we read physical books, like the camera app on the iPhone now, it has this button here. That is, you just point it at something and you scan the text, choose what you want, and you share it into your note app. But what about articles or stuff we read online, blogs and Medium articles and so on? How do we get them in? We can't highlight on the average blog, right? So we don't read on the web, we get a reader app. So when we find something interesting, we can save it to our reader app of choice. That's what I'm doing here. And that way we don't have to get stuck reading everything that's thrown in our face right away either. We can just save it for later, and when we want to read something, we have this amazing reading list of stuff we've collected. And we can choose the most interesting article to read. My favorite reader app is called Matter. It makes it super easy to highlight, just as easy as in Kindle, and add notes. And also, when I'm done, I can export all my notes or highlights in one go to my app. Podcasts are a bit trickier, of course, but there are ways. So my reader app, Matter, it has a podcast player. So I can share from my whatever podcast app I have into Matter, and it will create a transcript for me. So when I listen to it, it will follow along in the transcript. Done by AI, of course. And so I can highlight stuff in a podcast. And if I'm not listening on my phone, maybe I'm have my phone somewhere, I'm on my bike or whatever listening, I can double click on my AirPods and it will highlight the passage that they're talking about right now. This is my podcast app, Castro. It allows me to share audio snippets. So when I find something interesting, I hit a button and I get to share 30 seconds of the podcast, and I can share that into my notes straight away. I see the podcast girls here and nodding. So that's sort of end of level one. We decide upon a place to keep our knowledge and our ideas. We make an inbox. We make it easy to capture stuff whenever we need them, and we offload our brains so it's relaxed and can be creative and come up with great new stuff. And that becomes our divergent thinking. And when we sit down to work, we have stuff to work with. And I like the para way of organizing stuff because it's organized for action, like projects first. We put stuff in where we need it the soonest. And we can do book notes and article highlights and all that stuff and get that into our system. And it will make it much easier to remember what we learn and make use of what we learn. Same with ideas. We can remember them, bring them up when we need them, if we put them in the right folder. And we can reuse them and improve them. So when someone asks, oh, what was that thing? Can you send it to me? We don't have to write it again. We have it somewhere. You can access this. And maybe when we revisit something, we can make it just a bit better before we send it off the second time or the third time. And our notes become better and better. Mind like water. But then there's the next level. We never talked about this guy, Niklas Luhmann, and his secret. What was it he was doing? So when he got an idea or read something interesting, he didn't write it in a notebook. He wrote it down on a card like this. He wrote down the idea on the front of the card in his own words, full sentences. And we can see it, but up here in the corner, there's an ID for each idea, ID for an idea. And he put the card in these slip boxes, or in German, Zettelkasten, which is sort of a famous word in PKM. And on the back of the card, he made connections to other notes because they all had an ID. So he could note ideas to other ideas via their ID. I practiced that yesterday. Added them to Slipbox, and this Slipbox, it became his dialogue partner, his main idea generator. When people asked him, how could you be so productive? He said, well, I don't think everything myself. It happens mainly within the Slipbox. Like he was just picking out a card, following the connections, and made something new out of it. He didn't find it hard. He said that I only do what's easy. I only write when I immediately know how to do it. If I falter for a moment, I put the matter aside and I do something else. Sounds too good to be true, right? And his Slipbox is now digitized, and researchers are working on it to find out exactly how he was working, and it's displayed in galleries like here. When he would write a book, he would decide what the subjects he wanted to talk about were, write an outline, get the cards for the subjects, and just copy the text from the cards. And that was his first draft. And then he could write transitions and rewrite the draft and so on. That's important. But very fast, he had a draft for a new book or an article. That's how he could write those 70 plus books and 400 plus articles. So if we want to do this, it of course lends itself very well to digitizing. It's often called atomic notes, the idea of having just one idea on one note. Why? Well, if we write one note for each book, then we have lots of ideas in the same note. We have the same idea spread out over several notes and so on. It's better to collect everything about one idea in one note. Here's one of mine. Perfect is the enemy of good. One single idea, but I try to capture the entirety of that idea in my own words, in full sentences. It's just like writing comments in code, like we want to be able to understand what we wrote ourselves a few months later. Atomic notes, it's also like a bit like separation of concerns. And because I've written this in my words, it's my content. I can share it without feeling ashamed at any time. And of course, writing something in my own words makes sure that I understand what my idea is about or what it was I read or so on. This one is one of the funny ones because perfect is the enemy of good is a good theory, blah, 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 blah. I'm sure you're reading it instead of listening to me. But then I was listening to a podcast about music, and there was an interview with The Edge, the guitarist in U2. And he had a completely different take on this, which was fascinating. So I got this, if this is more about creativity. I wrote this in connection with my work, and then I found this other thing in music that was a great connection. So I saved one core concept, visualization. So many apps can visualize connections between nodes. So these are my atomic nodes related to product management. And I can follow my different nodes around here and see the connections. And there's value in these connections. These are, we often say that innovation is taking two existing things and combining them in a new thing. And that's what I can do here. I can start somewhere and follow a trail, get a few ideas together, and that can be an article or whatever. I can come up with something new from my stuff. And if I have this article or this note I took from a book, and maybe I made a little summary in my own words at the top for some idea, that's an atomic note. So as I take notes about stuff, I can break it out into atomic notes. And they can improve with time. As I use them again and again in different connections, I can improve on them. Some call them evergreen notes. And it becomes more like about note making rather than note taking. Say I wanted to write a LinkedIn article, and I say I have this idea. This is something a slide I came up with once in a presentation about that product discovery is more important than a lot of other stuff. And so, okay, what is product discovery and who does it? It's the product trio. Say I want to write a short article about this. I can just create links here, the square brackets, those are marked down for links. I'll write this outline. And then there's this cool thing in Obsidian called transclusion, where if I put an exclamation mark in front of the link, it just includes that note in this note. So all of a sudden I have a note with those three subjects ready to go as my first draft that I can rewrite and work on to make it better. Or this tool here, the presentation I'm doing right now, it's written in this, it's called IA Presenter, and it's a presentation all in Markdown. So sorry, Vix, I'm not using the official template here. That's atomic notes or digital Zettelkasten, sort of the next level. So we've talked about level 1 and level 2. Level 1, great start, make a place to put everything, and have an inbox, make it easy, make sure you can capture stuff at all times, have some form of structure so you know where to find your stuff. Though search is really great. And start building on the work we already have, and reuse stuff, make it better with time. And then we have level 2, like this atomic notes Zettelkasten thing, where Niklas Luhmann said it was doing most of his work. So that's what we can do. It's great to have some sort of routine where we review our notes, or our inbox at least, make sure we take stuff out and file it where it should be, so that we can trust our system. If we put something in the inbox, we know that we will find it later. That's when we have that mind like water. There's lots of software out there. I've tried them all. I can't help myself. I wish I'd had time to speak about Readwise. I don't today. If you want to go deeper, this book, excellent place to start. This book is more about Zettelkasten and Niklas Luhmann and writing scientific articles, but it applies for us as well. And of course, there are online things as well. And just the goal here is not to take notes, but to think efficiently or effectively and have great ideas and be creative. So thank you, and excuse me for not having any cats in my presentation.